All right, people. So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to lecture number 9 from Polity in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. As you all know this by now, if you have been following this lecture series, that through this lecture series, we will revise our entire syllabus for Prelims 2026 examination. The entire syllabus. That includes current affairs, segregated subject wise, and that also includes static topics, the associated static topics, because we all know that static topics which have some connection with current affairs have a higher chance of featuring in your prelims examination. Therefore, we will cover everything. Okay? Associated static topics, current affairs, everything. So make sure that you follow this lecture series diligently. Now, you have to follow 4 steps to have that due diligence. Okay? Now, these 4 steps are as following. Step number 1, watch the lecture on time. Don't keep your lectures pending. Then step number 2, memorize the notes that we are going to provide you. Okay, memorize them because those notes would contain all the information discussed in the lectures as well as some extra information as well. So memorize those notes. It's very important. Then step number 3, well, we have enrolled you in our WhatsApp groups. Those groups are specifically created to address all your doubts. So use those groups judiciously, okay? As soon as a doubt occurs in your mind, ask that doubt in those WhatsApp groups. And step number 4, very important. In fact, I think the most important step. And that is, along with this lecture series, you'll be getting access to our prelims test series as well. Be regular with those tests. It's very important. Tests are going to decide your chances in prelims examination. MCQ practice is key and mock tests are the key. Therefore, be regular with the tests. Okay? So these are the 4 steps. Now, as far as step 1 is concerned, you don't have to worry about it at all. The lectures would be uploaded on YouTube. But for step number 2, which is notes, WhatsApp groups and test series, you would have to register on our app or on our website. The links to both are given in the comment section just below this video. Okay, just click on any of the link and fulfill the formalities and then you would be good to go. All right then, enough of the introduction. Let's straight away jump into the lecture. And our today's topic of discussion is PESA Act 1996, which is, the full form is Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act. Now, you all know about 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. Okay, these Constitutional Amendment Acts added a third tier to governance in India. The top tier is the center, the middle tier is the states, and the third, bottommost tier is Panchayati Raj institutions. In rural areas, there are panchayats. In urban areas, there are urban local bodies or municipalities. Right? So 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act basically added this third tier for grassroots democracy. Now, the thing is that in our country, there are some special territories. Okay, there are tribal territories in India. Okay, and then there are tribal territories of Northeast. Now, tribal territories of Central India, except Northeast, all the other areas are kept in Schedule 5 of the Constitution. And for Northeast, those tribal areas are kept in Schedule 6. Now, those are tribal areas. These areas have their own system of governance, local customs, local traditions. Therefore, you could not have extended 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act to these areas. So, in 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, an exception was added. And this exception was Schedule 5 areas, Schedule 6 areas, basically scheduled areas and tribal areas. Right? But the aim of the government was to provide grassroots democracy to these tribal areas as well. Therefore, after 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, then in 1996, well, a law was passed, which was this PESA law, okay, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act. Through this, with some modifications, 73rd Amendment Act, which was for panchayats, okay, in rural areas. So 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act with some tweaking, okay, basically adjusting to tribal customs. That was extended to scheduled areas as well. Okay, so through PESA Act, you provided panchayats, institutions of local self-governance in rural areas of these tribal areas. Now remember, PESA Act extends panchayats to scheduled areas, which is Schedule 5 areas. For Northeast, the tribal areas of Northeast, there are other provisions. So remember this key fact because they will make an MCQ out of it. Okay, PESA Act only applies to Schedule 5 areas. We'll talk about it. Okay, in fact, let's start talking about it. So let's begin. So Polity lecture number 9, PESA 1996. Okay, PESA stands for Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas, Act, okay, 1996. Now, why are we discussing PESA Act? Because something happened in current affairs, okay? Remember, I told you that we will cover current affairs, but we'll also cover the associated static topics. So PESA Act is the associated static topic. But what was in the news? Because of which PESA, the static topic, we have to discuss today. So this was in the news. Special Gram Sabhas held across 1 lakh tribal dominated villages and tolas adopted the Tribal Village Vision 2030 declaration as part of Adi Karm Yogi Abhiyan. Now this vision is for tribal governance or grassroots democracy, grassroots governance in tribal areas. Okay, and because we are talking about tribal governance, hence this PESA Act becomes important because most of these tribal areas are rural areas. So PESA Act basically covers tribal rural areas, not urban, rural areas. Okay, now let's talk about PESA Act first. Okay, so PESA Act. So it extends Part 9. You remember? 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act introduced Panchayati Raj institutions in our democracy. And for that, they added Part 9 of the Constitution. Part 9 of the Constitution and 11th Schedule to the Constitution. Okay. And 74th Amendment Act, which was for urban areas, urban local bodies. Well, Part 9A was added and 12th Schedule was added. But I'm guessing you already know this. Okay. Let's focus on PESA. So it extends Part 9 of the Constitution, Panchayats, to scheduled areas under Article 244, Clause 1, with modifications to protect tribal customs and empower Gram Sabhas. Now, if you're familiar with Panchayati Raj institutions, you know what Gram Sabhas are. In a village, there are eligible voters, there is a voter list, okay? So all the voters, registered voters in a village constitute Gram Sabha. So every voter of that village is part of Gram Sabha. Okay. So PESA Act gives powers to Gram Sabhas as well as the tribal panchayats, which will have elections and all. It was enacted on December 24, 1996. It addresses the gaps in 73rd Amendment. What were the gaps in 73rd Amendment? Because 73rd Amendment was not applicable to tribal areas. That was addressed through this. Remember, only 5th scheduled tribal areas, not 6th scheduled. 6 scheduled tribal areas are applicable to Northeast. Make sense? Okay. It aims to enable tribal self-governance by recognizing customary laws of tribals, different customs, preserving cultural identity, and granting Gram Sabha authority over local resources and development. So the local resources, whether it is mineral resources, water resources, okay, wood, forest resources, or authority over those resources would be given to Gram Sabhas. Okay. It promotes sustainable development, prevents land alienation, ensures tribal benefits from schemes through beneficiary selection by Gram Sabha. So all government schemes for development would be enacted or would be implemented in these tribal areas through Gram Sabhas. These are the powers given to Gram Sabhas. Okay. Now, what is the mandate of this act? The act mandates state laws to conform to specific features in Section 4. Okay. So PESA Act has Section 4. Section 4 says that every state will enact a law to implement panchayats in their state, right? Now that law should contain the provisions of PESA Act, okay, especially those states which have tribal areas. So every state law which will enact panchayats should contain provisions, important provisions of PESA Act in their laws so that those panchayats are extended to tribal areas as well. Okay. Now, which provisions are mandatory in state laws? These provisions are mentioned in Section 4. Now, what are these provisions? Okay. So every state law enacting panchayats in a state will take care of following provisions. Gram Sabhas should be given powers. What powers would be given to Gram Sabhas? Approve development plans, select beneficiaries of government schemes. There are various government schemes, right? Now, those government schemes are for eligible beneficiaries. Who would identify those beneficiaries? Gram Sabhas would. Okay. Certifies fund utilization. Government gave 2 crore for development. Now they would certify that 1 crore went towards canal construction, 50 lakh went towards embankment construction, various developmental plans. Okay. safeguard traditions and resolve disputes also. Tribal disputes or any disputes with respect to these resources shall be resolved by Gram Sabhas. So basically, PESA Act makes it mandatory that in tribal areas, Gram Sabhas will have a lot of powers. Okay, at least 50% of seats reserved for scheduled tribes. Now, these tribal areas also has non-tribal population. Yes, but these are tribal areas mentioned in 5th schedule of the Constitution. So in these tribal areas, panchayats would be elected, right? Now 50% of the seats should be reserved for scheduled tribes. Though the authority is given to the states to reserve seats in proportion with the population. So if in that panchayat 70% are tribals, then 70% seats should be reserved for STs. But minimum 50% reservation should be there for scheduled tribes. Okay, so lower limit is there. Lower limit is 50%. Rest is up to the state. They can increase it to 60%, 70% based on the population, but they can't keep it lower than 50%. Okay, and all seats of chairpersons of panchayats will be for STs. Only STs can be chairpersons of those panchayats. Okay, panchayats manage minor water bodies. Gram Sabha is consulted on land acquisition, mining leases for minor minerals. You see, the thing is that most of these tribal areas, Schedule 5 areas, are rich in mineral resources, iron, bauxite, okay, many minerals. Now, sometimes big companies acquire land fraudulently, displacing these tribals from their land and mine for minerals. Now, this is wrong for these tribals. So, Gram Sabhas have been empowered to approve land acquisition by these big mining companies. Okay, so Gram Sabha is considerably empowered. Now, to which states would this PESA Act be applicable? Remember, I told you, PESA Act is applicable to those tribal areas mentioned in Schedule 5. And which states are mentioned in Schedule 5? Well, Andhra Pradesh, now Telangana. Okay, those parts of Telangana, specific parts of Telangana. Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Himachal, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan. 10 states. Okay, examples include, now not the entire state is not Schedule 5 area. The tribal areas in Gujarat would come under schedule areas. There are specific districts that come under Schedule 5, but all those districts cover these 10 states. Examples like Jhabua in MP, Dangs in Gujarat, Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, most have framed PESA rules. Okay, most states have framed rules for implementing PESA. Odisha and Jharkhand have still not framed those rules. Nonetheless, this information is not important. Just remember that most states have framed these rules. But if they ask an MCQ that which state has not framed the rules for PESA Act, then it is Odisha and Jharkhand. Okay. Now, some more key facts regarding PESA. Okay, it is very important because MCQs can be constructed out of these key facts. 6th schedule, which covers tribal areas of Northeast, won't be covered under PESA. Just remember, PESA exclusively caters to 5th schedule because our constitution has already inserted, our constitution basically already has certain provisions for tribal autonomy in 6th schedule Northeast tribal areas. So northeastern tribal areas already have provisions for local autonomy. So, and they don't like the concept of panchayats. So the panchayats have not been extended to these areas. Okay. 6th schedule of the constitution provides autonomy to tribal areas in Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram. While 5th schedule deals with administration of scheduled areas, scheduled tribes in states except those mentioned in 6th schedule. Okay, basically this point means that 5th schedule areas are those areas which have considerable population of scheduled tribes, and those scheduled tribes are not from Northeast or 6th schedule basically. Okay. Now, customary tribal institutions. This is important. Now look, these tribal areas, these tribes have their own customary institutions as well, which take care of various things. Okay, they have their own sabhas, their own samitis, they have their own institutions as per their own tribal customary law. PESA Act would not interfere with these customary tribal institutions. PESA Act would not replace these institutions. PESA would only complement these institutions. Okay, so otherwise, if it would have replaced these institutions, then these tribals would have agitated, because no tribal wants to basically separate from their own customary institutions. They have a lot of faith in their customary institutions. That is why government couldn't have extended or allowed PESA to replace these institutions. So this would only complement it. Make sense? Okay. Now, issues in tribal governance. Despite so many provisions for tribal autonomy, development in tribal areas still suffer from various problems. Those problems are mentioned in your notes. Some of those problems are PESA is not being implemented properly. Okay. Now, in fifth schedule, you must have studied this. The scheduled areas in fifth schedule have a provision called Tribal Advisory Council. The governor, the president shall create Tribal Advisory Council. You must have studied about that. Okay, governor, they would advise the governor on administration and all. But the problem is, these tribal advisory councils only have advisory role. They have little to no power. So this is one problem. Then poor outreach of developmental programs in tribal areas. Government has so many developmental programs, yet very few of those benefits reach tribal areas because of poor connectivity and many such issues. Plus, most of these areas were also Naxal affected. That was also one of the reasons. And then the biggest issue, land acquisition. Many tribals have complained that these big, giant mining companies acquire their land, displace them for their own profit. So this is a problem. Land Acquisition Act is also a problem. Okay. Nonetheless, that is a separate topic. So yeah. Now let's talk about what was in the current affairs. What was in current affairs? So Tribal Village Vision 2030. So what is this vision basically? Vision Declaration. 2030 Declaration that was adopted. So village level priorities would be set in fifth schedule areas. Each declaration outlines actionable goals in education, health, livelihood, social and financial inclusion, infrastructure at village level. So the goals have been set up till 2030 for these tribal areas. Plus special institutions have been established to implement these goals, like Adi Seva Kendras. Adi comes from Adivasi, tribals, okay? So Adi Seva Kendras in every village are single window citizen service centers, okay, where all government schemes, information about all government schemes would be available, with villagers contributing 1 hour per week for voluntary service. This voluntary service is called Adi Seva Samay in these kendras, okay? So it is basically participatory democracy. Everyone is pitching in. All right. Now, this Tribal Village Vision 2030 declaration is part of Adi Karmyogi Abhiyan, which was also launched last year. So let's gather some information about this Abhiyan. Okay. So Adi Karmyogi Abhiyan is a national mission launched by Ministry of Tribal Affairs to build decentralized tribal leadership, responsive governance in tribal areas. It empowers 20 lakh change makers. These tribals would be called change makers across 1 lakh tribal villages in 550 districts and 30 states through capacity building and community participation. Launched by PM Modi from MP, it aligns with Janjatiya Gaurav Varsh. Janjati, again tribal, pride year. Like there is Pride month, so there is Pride year. So tribal pride year and Vikasit Bharat, emphasizing Seva, Sankalp and Samarpan. This is the motto of this Karmyogi Abhiyan. Okay. The initiative trains and mobilizes 20 lakh tribal leaders for effective last mile service delivery. It promotes Village Vision 2030. This is some information, some key features. It has 3 pillars as announced by Prime Minister Modi. Adi Karmyogi, government officers for governance. Okay. Adi Sahyogi, youth, teachers, doctors for services. Adi Sathi, self-help group members, elders for community mobilization. So Adivasis should be basically encouraged to get into government service, become Adi Sahyogi, youth, teachers, doctors, and Adi Sathi. Okay. Adi Seva Kendras, governance lab. Okay. So this is some information that you have to remember. Just go through this. Okay. And in your notes, you will have some extra information, and that extra information would be related to many other government steps taken for tribal welfare. So please go through this as well. Okay, there are various schemes like the one written over here, PM Janman, Dharti Aba Janjatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan. There are so many government initiatives. Just go through those government initiatives for tribals. Okay, but by the way, the objective of this lecture was to make you familiar with fifth schedule, PESA. That is more important. Okay, all right. With that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But it would add more value if you'll follow these 3 steps, memorize from notes, ask your doubts, and be regular with tests. Please follow these 3 steps, and I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another topic in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. Thank you, everyone.